U.S. Opens. This is the Pittsburgh Golf Now Par 4. I'm Matt Gajtka with Zach Weiss. Call it the intermission show, I suppose, as we go over to the U.S. Women's Open, which just took place last weekend at the Olympic Club in San Francisco. And we look forward to the U.S. Men's Open coming up next weekend. Well, not this weekend, but the following weekend, if you catch my drift, just down the coast at Torrey Pines outside San Diego. And in between that, though, plenty going on. Really, it's been a very busy time of the golf calendar and also a very newsy time of the golf calendar. And Zach, we'll start with the most newsworthy item from the past week. Not the happiest item by any means. Definitely, I would say the most frustrating for a lot of folks involved. But let's get into it. Jon Rahm had to withdraw from the Memorial Tournament in Columbus, in Dublin, Ohio. Jack's Place, as always, getting back to its normal spot on the schedule, on the calendar. And Jon Rahm was looking like he was going to cruise to his second consecutive Memorial victory. Of course, if you follow golf at all, if you follow sports at all this past weekend, you know he had to withdraw with a 6-stroke lead because he had tested positive for COVID-19. He was put into COVID protocol earlier that week because he was in close contact with someone who had the virus. And we can presume he was not vaccinated, even though that was not ever explicitly said by the tour or by Rahm or his representatives. But if you are vaccinated totally on the PGA Tour, you don't have to go through the protocol, even if you do get into close contact with someone who is infected. So we can draw the conclusion there, Zach. But the tougher conclusion is to figure out where, if anywhere, the PGA Tour went wrong with this. I'm not sure they necessarily did. We're still all playing this by ear in a large degree, more than a year after COVID has wreaked havoc on our lives. And this is really, I was looking back to other sports and thinking about situations where COVID's really come into play. We haven't had a situation like this where a player or a team has been outright robbed of a sure victory. I don't want to say too much, but 6-stroke lead, certainly on the PGA Tour, that's probably about a 99.9% conversion rate for the guy who has it, especially when he's one of the best players in the world. So can you pin any blame on how this whole thing went down, other than on, of course, the villain of the past 2 years, COVID-19?
Everybody's to blame. And in no way, shape, or form is this entire situation a perfect one. John understood the risk that goes on with contact tracing, and with that being, he was not allowed to go inside any of the Merrifield Village Golf Club facilities. No chat with the guys unless he's on the range. None of this, no milkshakes, nothing. And it makes it difficult mentally, but in a sense, maybe it helped him because he focused, he tuned out all of the outside noise and everything else. Obviously, like you said, Saturday night, about to have a 6-shot lead. I even tweeted in revisionist history, very much so, just Jon Rahm seeing a different golf course than everybody else is, and to be potentially in the dormy seat to be the second ever champion to successfully defend, with some guy named Tiger Woods being the other one. So everything really was shaping up, and then all of a sudden, this is where the PGA Tour went wrong. They did everything right by double testing that to make sure that that positive was not a false positive, but to go on the green and physically tell him after the round, when there's still cameras, there's still a live broadcast, and there's still a bunch of fans that are just around, and they see him essentially on all fours reacting to the news. And you thought the worst. You thought, oh no, something happened with his family. I mean, he's now him and his wife have a newborn baby, and just the challenges that go with that. So obviously you hope that it's not anything bad news related coming home. And that provides a very, very intricate test. And from a CBS standpoint, neither Jim Nantz nor Nick Faldo were tipped off in any way, shape, or form that this announcement was happening. And for them to essentially watch and get the news from Dottie Pepper the same way that all of us did, when really, as the rights holders, the camera guy knew more than the guys in the booth that were providing the news, and the camera guy was being shooed away by Adam Hayes, who was Jon Rahm's caddy in the situation. So really, it's something that I think the PGA Tour really missed on, because it's a miscommunication to the fans, it's a miscommunication to the broadcast partners, and it's just poorly handled. If it was something simple where you let John go into the scoring area and there's enough social distancing where you can say, John, we're sorry, we tested everything, you came back positive. I mean, in a sense, You look back at that 2016 U.S. Open with Dustin Johnson, and they warned him that they very early on in that round that the USGA did, and they got vilified for it. Hey, we might have seen that there might be a penalty here. We're going to review it, and then after the round, we'll see what happens. If at 420, when you initially discovered that Jon Rahm was positive and he was on the golf course, I get that he's an athlete. I get that he's focused on his round. If you tell him, John, we found a positive, don't panic. There's no reason to panic yet. We're going back to test to make sure, keep playing. Something that very quick exchange that can happen in between holes. And with the 18th hole being what it is, and John in such a driver's seat on that Saturday afternoon turning into evening, obviously you look at things and you see that him and his playing partner were the only two on the course at that point. So of course all eyes are on them. If at 420, I mean, John might be just making the turn on a 10, 11, 12 at that point. There's several other groups where there's easily more distraction, where you can tell John and you don't necessarily get a guttural reaction. And maybe you see Dottie Pepper report a little bit of showmanship on John's action where he goes, oh no, not again. But even if it's in the back of his mind, at least he knows that, hey, this is a possibility. And just to prepare himself, distance himself from his caddy as much as possible, distance himself from any patrons, distance himself or fans, distance himself from his playing partner and his caddy, anybody else that's affiliated with the golf course. I mean, Jon Rahm was 2 feet away from the reporters in the flash area in between the second and the third round. So if a reporter was not properly vaccinated, then the contact tracing, of course, is an issue. I mean, again, while the PGA Tour mishandled that situation, John also willingly accepted the risks and anything that came with it. And let's not forget that earlier in the year, Brandon Grace was in a very, very similar situation. And I don't know if he was leading or if he was in second, but regardless, he was very much in the golf tournament, tested positive, and that was all she wrote. I mean, they had to pull the plug, and not pulling the plug on John or letting him play as a single on Sunday would have been inconsistent with the standard that anybody had played on with. And it's very, very rough. There is no necessarily right way to handle it, but the PGA Tour didn't do right by anybody by bringing everybody onto the green. The best situation would have been to handle it in scoring where there's no cameras and it's literally 4 to 5 people plus the PGA Tour people, so no one has to know, and John can exit stage right and not be seen by people, and just figure out a way to make that happen where he has a special route where he goes and he just leaves, and the PGA Tour just puts out a statement, and that's the end of it instead of this whole ordeal. Of course, John could have said, hey, you know what, there's a chance for me to test positive. From an integrity standpoint, we don't think he's vaccinated. I would highly doubt that he was vaccinated. It seemed like he was vaccinated, but for the first shot, but only after the news of the contact tracing had transpired. So even doing so, obviously that's not enough time. And then of course, time's not on his side to get 2 negatives within 24-hour span when the round is already over in the third round. So there's just no way. I mean, it was mishandled all the way around. With Xander Schauffele did an interview earlier today on the Dan Patrick Show, just saying the PGA Tour, it was the way that they handled it was not proper. That's a polite way of how he said it. There was a swear word in there, which you've seen Xander. He doesn't really swear much in interviews, so you could tell it was something that really set him off. And with Xander being an even keel guy, if Xander's frustrated by it, then I'm sure others are as well. I do see in the chat a comment from Ron Sutton asking, could this have been handled differently? I mean, of course this could be handled differently. I mean, going back to the answer, I think the best case would have been that, yes, they tested the positive, the PGA Tour did everything right. Jon Rahm willingly accepted the risks and obviously has a delayed return to his family. And now how much practice time he would get for the U.S. Open in a couple weeks' time is very much in flux, especially at a course where he would be expected to be among the favorites, if not the favorite. And now, if they had told him, hey, at the scoring table, like I said, in the scoring tent, hey, look, you tested positive, let's get you out of here. I'm sure any reactions or thoughts, he would have been able to compose himself in more time and then go on his own time where there's less fans, no one's demanding autographs because there's a no autograph policy on tour. And the media would just have to understand, hey, we're just not going to get quotes from this guy. The guy that happens to be the third round leader, but also happens to be a very noteworthy and noticeable withdrawal. So it's not necessarily unprecedented because, again, we had the Brandon Grace situation. We did have several other positive tests, albeit usually before tournament play began and during practice run days after initial tests. But he was tested every single day, and I mean, obviously, we know that it can take 14 days for these positive results to show up, and it took a little bit longer for Jon Rahm's positive result to come back. And I think that everybody can learn from this. I think with what was said with the PGA Tour that night, with just north of 50 players being fully vaccinated, essentially the PGA Tour is a traveling circus. You're traveling so many tournaments a year. You're bringing your entourage with you, albeit smaller right now, whether it's caddy, maybe a coach. Of course, you have ball reps and all these people traveling as well, and you have all these other playing partners, and you don't know if you're playing with is vaccinated or not. I mean, it's a personal choice, and I mean, you can't criticize someone for their decision, but if they're not taking the precautions, situations like this can happen as well. So, I mean, is this a perfect situation? No, it's not. And I know the PGA Tour will hopefully realize this situation, and maybe more players now will see the benefit, and caddies as well, and other people as well, of doing so. Because now, I mean, how do you judge contact tracing? Because how close were the fans to John? How close were Xander Schauffele, Patrick Cantlay? Who else was in the mix? I mean, there's so many other guys. Scotty Scheffler. I mean, did they have to get contact tracing? I'm sure they got asked if they got vaccinated. I mean, so on and so forth. And then you go down to the caddies. You go down to the marshals, guys that have been at a memorial tournament for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years that are helping assist at their favorite holes. Now, do they have to get contact traced by the volunteer chair people? I mean, it's a whole thing, and it opens up another can of worms. And I mean, the celebration of Muirfield Village Golf Club was that this was the new course and probably the last chance for Jack Nicklaus to have a lasting imprint on the course, given how many renovations have been done and given his unfortunately advanced age at this point in time. Just all things considered, this was a chance, and in a sense it was overlooked. And I mean, going to the next, I'm sure we're going to talk about Patrick Cantlay here pretty soon, but I mean, just the impact this leaves. I mean, you almost don't even think about the golf tournament at that point. That's tough.
I still can't believe that Jon Rahm didn't get vaccinated earlier than this. He got his first shot after he learned about the contact tracing situation. So, yeah, it's on him more than anything else. And it sounds like you're more upset with how the PGA Tour handled the presentation of the news there. I understand that, but also to a certain degree. Do you want to let that just go off the air, like CBS go off the air, thinking that Rahm is still playing in the tournament and that everything is proceeding as normal? I'm not sure you want to do that either. So, like I said, we're all kind of playing this by ear. I don't put a huge onus on the PGA Tour. What I certainly don't put on the PGA Tour is their policy of having him withdraw, because that's what they've done in the past. That was the policy coming into the week. I don't believe in changing it during the week because they're trying to encourage people to get vaccinated. It's the same reason why states are having lotteries and why people who are fully vaccinated are being allowed in some certain circumstances, in some places, in some cities, are being allowed to go indoors without masks. So it's all part of this incentivizing game that we're playing here. And for better or worse, that's the situation we're in. So I don't have an issue with Rahm being forced to withdraw. I just don't understand how he would take that risk. A guy who has a young family, as you said, and also a player who puts himself in a position to win more often than not, week in and week out. So he did not get the win, even though in many people's hearts he is the back-to-back champion of the Memorial Tournament. Patrick Cantlay outlasted Colin Morikawa on the first playoff hole this past Sunday. And I'm left wondering, what value is a win? For me, though, Zach, I think wins are actually overappreciated when it comes to golf results. You need some luck to get a win. You need maybe an outstanding performance, one that is well above your usual ability level. For me, I appreciate the guys who put themselves in position to win over and over and over again. And honestly, either one of those two gentlemen who were in the playoff, Patrick Cantlay or Colin Morikawa, have done it many times over. And of course, Morikawa has a major, but he's been as good as advertised, if not more so, after coming into the PGA Tour ranks from Cal. And Cantlay seems like he's a top 10 in every major, in every big tournament that's out there. So a very deserved win. And I don't take anything away from either one of those guys. I don't take anything away from Cantlay, especially for pulling it out and taking home the victory. Because, as you know, Zach, it's a great leaderboard. It's a great tournament. Even if you were to finish solo second, it's just as good as a win most weeks on the PGA Tour. That's at least my perspective there.
I mean, I still give it a little bit of an asterisk. I mean, he won the golf tournament, but he didn't win the golf tournament. I mean, John Rahm was the winner of that golf tournament. You might as well have given him the Buckeye milkshake and everything else that comes with it. I mean, I think going back to point one, I think a lot of it also was John Rahm thinking he'd had COVID before and he might have been invincible with the antibodies and took a chance and lost. And I mean, he's absolutely to blame for that. By no means am I not blaming John Rahm for that situation. I mean, he accepted the risk. It's like signing the waiver. It's like signing the permission slip. When you sign the permission slip, you go, you assume all risks that go with that. And he made a decision. He gambled and he lost, and that's too bad. And that's on him. And the tournament moved on. And really, what we saw on Sunday was not the greatest golf display from the leaders. I mean, Brendan Grace kind of dropped out a little bit early. Scheffler had spots. I just think he simply ran out of holes. So really, you had a lot of experienced guys that have gotten it done. Morikawa got it done at Workday, and obviously Cantlay got it done a couple of years ago. And the putt that Cantlay had to win in the first playoff hole was actually similar to the one that he had in, I don't know if it was regulation or the playoff, a couple of years prior when he won the Memorial. And I think it came down to course knowledge. And yes, Morikawa won on this track last year, but it was a little bit of a Muirfield Village light, if you can recall, because the fairways the greens weren't running as fast on the stent meter. The rough wasn't cut nearly as thick. And I think you saw that on the playoff and on the 72nd hole where Cantlay essentially got himself in jail. His miss was consistently wide right. But what he was able to do was what he was able to do from the end of that third round when he got that news and not panic. And Cantlay outwardly is someone that doesn't give you too much. He's kind of a stonewall kind of player. And in this instance, it really served him well. And although you had said he's had a lot of good results, he hasn't really been golfing his golf ball that well. But I mean, when you go to this tournament where he has such a close relationship with Jack Nicklaus, when they had the talk when he won a couple of years ago, when Nicklaus was telling Patrick, hey, settle down a little bit, enjoy the moment, smile a little bit, enjoy it. And when they had the talk, Jack said, you finished? And he said, yes, I finished. And the smile was back. And you saw he kind of gave himself a little bit of a fried egg there in that rough dealing with that shot. But he knew where the right side was. And it was a very similar putt to that putt in regulation. The line looked nearly identical. So it didn't seem like he had much in the way of worrying there. And I think in the case of Morikawa, I think really it started with that delay on 17 and that 5 minute rain delay where he literally hit a kind of a chunky pitch there, I would say. And then they called for rain, whether Patrick called for the rain or the rules official finally decided to intervene. But of course, it didn't do Colin any good. And give Colin all the credit in the world. That's as good of a par as you're going to see in that circumstance, especially after Cantlay makes a birdie after that delay. He had all that time to sit and think with his caddy, Matt Minister, about that putt. And here it is with Colin having essentially, if he misses, I mean, let's be honest, that was the golf tournament. I mean, Patrick's just so even keel. You know he's going to par 18 at the absolute worst. And even still, he came dang close to winning it there. I mean, it was very thrilling to watch that finish, although I will admit I was flipping back and forth a bit because I just think that there was a more compelling television on in that moment. It's not because the two guys necessarily that were on. It was just what was going on, which we'll get to very, very soon. But all things considered, I mean, Patrick Cantlay's one of those guys that haven't gotten over the hump. And I mean, for whatever that reason is, I mean, he won the Shriners a few years ago. He's now won 2 Memorials. I mean, he has the game, like we both said, to contend. It just, for whatever reason, hasn't happened, whether it's just getting outclassed, somebody who has a little bit more flash in the game, if he just isn't ready to take that hump, like a lot of these young Americans are. I mean, so many have just flirted. I mean, you saw Ricky Fowler several years ago flirt. You've seen Xander Schauffele flirt. You've seen so many guys on down the line that just flirted, but just can't get that last year and whatever that is. And I'm not sure what it is. I mean, even Cantlay got into a playoff at Shriners against Kevin Na, and you would have thought, okay, this is a slam dunk. Cantlay's unflappable. And then he shanks one and just knocks himself out and just plays smart golf. I mean, whatever it has been, just Cantlay hasn't consistently gotten over. But I think it's just that he feels that Muirfield Village is his home in a sense. That relationship with Jack Nicklaus, his course knowledge, just some switch goes off in his head, and it's hard to explain, but he's able to put it together, and he's able to find some happiness and peace here. And if that can do him well for the rest of the year, I mean, he's number one, I believe, in the FedEx Cup points race right now, albeit very, very early, mid-ish to the season. I mean, who's to say it could happen? But I mean, it's a win. I mean, I take a little bit away from the win because I think he went from feeling he had to shoot a round in the low 60s to maybe trying to scrape around. But I think he was still trying to find himself a bit, and mentally that gear just might not have switched, but it switched enough in time for it to matter, and that was enough on this past weekend.
So a landmark win for Cantlay, getting the repeat at Memorial and putting himself in good position with some great memories. Recent memories are always very valuable in the sport of golf, and he'll head to the U.S. Open with that. Speaking of the U.S. Open, as you alluded to, going on at the same time, again, Zach, the main story is perhaps the player who doesn't win the tournament. Yuka Saso of the Philippines is your 19-year-old champion of the U.S. Women's Open, for the first time being played at the Olympic Club, which has hosted several U.S. Men's Opens. So I'd like to see the crossing of the streams there. That was a lot of fun to see the women take on that challenge. Boy, the rough was up. And you know those greens and those fairways are canted and tilted, slanted heavily in every direction that you can imagine. The entire course is built on the side of a hill, of course. If you ever watched any of the golf there, it seems like a place that's a lot of times impossible to even hit a fairway, let alone a green. But Saso wins the playoff against Hataoka of Japan. But Lexi Thompson, the one-time American wunderkind, now Zach in her, 10th or 11th season on tour already. She's still just 26, but she's had so many close calls, including a couple in majors that could have maybe vaulted her to a different level of stardom. She has one major championship, but it's been a while now. It's been 7 or 8 years. And in fact, Rory McIlroy has won a major more recently than Lexi Thompson. She led by 5 strokes, excruciatingly giving it all away on the back 9, just bleeding it out. 1 bogey here, 1 bogey there. Before she knew it, she wasn't even in the playoff by the end of the day. So pretty remarkable situation there after Thompson had shot a brilliant round, bogey-free 65, I believe it was, or 66 in the 3rd round to put her in great position. But Thompson again comes up short, and it is once again a reminder of the international nature of the women's game right now, as Yuka Saso, 19 years old, ties for the youngest women's major winner ever. And you might say, if you're an American golf fan, it's a buzzkill, but there was buzz around Saso all week too. Just happened to be that she had to come from way behind on Sunday. So what do you remember about the U.S. Women's Open at Olympic Club this year?
To borrow Andrew McCutcheon's phrase, "Oh for freaking 11." That's not the streak of how long it has been since an American in the women's golf game has won a major championship. That dates back to Angela Stanford, I believe, as well. So that lets you know where the game is at. I mean, you've had Danielle King, who's been the standout primarily. You've had some good results, including one from Allie Ewing last week at the match play event as well. But, I mean, just Danielle hasn't turned it into major wins of late since we last had the conversation about everything that went on in Sylvania, Ohio, just outside of Toledo. So, I mean, just it hasn't translated into majors for the Americans. And really, I mean, unfortunately for Yuka, who seems to have borrowed the good components of Rory McIlroy's swing and just the unflappable nature of her persevering over Nasa Hataoka just to make that par on the 2nd playoff hole at the age of 19, that is not an easy putt at all. If you put a golf ball down for yourself and myself 100 times, you and I probably make that 3 times, maybe. At least I'll speak that for myself, and I'm a good putter. But I mean,
are you okay? Calling yourself a good putter? No, I like it. I like the confidence.
You've seen me play. I think I'm a good putter.
Closer you get to the hole, the better you are. I will give you that.
Anyways, regardless of that, that's distracting from the point, which is the fact that, unfortunately, the story will be Lexi Thompson. And hopefully for her mental health, she's able to take the positives, that she put herself in contention, that her game is showing a lot of flashes. But it's hard to avoid it's hard to place what exactly was happening. It seems like she was trying to convince herself to stay in the moment, but actions spoke louder than words. She consistently was missing the green short. And I'm not sure if that was nerves, if that was she just wasn't committing fully to a shot, if it was because she was trying to sky the ball to limit the spin or limit errors or anything like that, or if it was just her relationship with her caddy, where the LPGA Tour does have a lot of caddy changes, just wasn't there. And he would either say, trust me, and either she would trust him, or she would go off on her own and her instinct, she just got nervous in the moment. It's hard to say what will happen, and there's only one person that knows that answer, and I think that's going to take time for that person, Lexi, to figure out that answer. And hopefully it's not a lot of scar tissue. Like you said, she's been in this game so long, even at the age of 26. I mean, she's been, ever since her teenage years, she's been in the spotlight. It's very similar to what Michelle Lee had to go through in some senses. And Michelle obviously got a little bit more media attention, but Lexi consistently was getting in USGA championships and was consistently making headlines. I mean, it was her, it was Michelle, it was Paula Creamer. I mean, those were some of the names in the mid 2010, 20 teens. Christy Kerr, I mean, and it's just a lot of those names haven't been able to turn it around, unfortunately, and it's what we've talked about. And this was a really good opportunity for Lexi to kind of battle her demons. Yes, it was her first major was good, but this would have also been a very much a signature win. I believe the first is at the then Kraft Nabisco Championship. So this would have been a really, really good opportunity for her to get another signature win, prove something to herself, physical, mental, whatever the case is. But this is a course, like you said, that it exposes you if you miss. There's not really a good miss. Those greens were really, really tricky. And I mean, credit Nasa Hataoka. I mean, she was playing the best golf down that stretch. I think that pause, it always is tricky. How do you handle a pause, which was her waiting for another group or two to come in? She opted to wait by scoring instead of hitting balls. Whether that was a logistical thing, who knows? But I have to give also credit to Mega Gane, the low amateur. I mean, just the way that she showed a lot of game. I mean, she was the first round leader after Thursday. And really, for someone that just last year just was struggling just to find success on the golf course in the very same championship, to make that clutch putt on 18, especially when that round just mistakes were compiling, especially early and weren't going her way, for her to put things together and get low amateur has to be huge for her confidence. You could see that birdie on 17, you could see the fist bump on 18, you could see that even though she was not getting the ball in as she would like, she was still getting her small victories, and it kept her going. And she seemed to be enjoying herself out there more than anybody else. Lexi, I think, just the smile, everything was just wearing on her. I think Nasa was just focused on the moment. And Yuka's just a hard player to read. I mean, already at 19, but I mean, the best part of the whole thing in Yuka's case was, obviously, we talked before about the Sophia Popov rule, which was her not having status on the LPGA Tour and earning a major win, but it didn't give her an exemption on the tour. And Yuka benefits from that change in that rule, and now she has a 5-year exemption. Her figuring that out was even more joyous to watch than her winning the championship, because now she knows she has status, and now she knows the sponsors will be coming. There will be money opportunities, there will be tournament opportunities, and for her to know that for the next 5 years, she has the opportunity to play freely in any tournament that she chooses, it has to be a wonderful feeling. So congratulations to Yuka. Congratulations to Nasa on great playing. I mean, congrats to Shen Fong on gambling on not playing that consolation match and put it into a top 5 finish. Mega Gane did great. I mean, and let's not take anything away from Lexi. For about 85 to 90% of the tournament, she had it in her fingers. And that has to be good moving forward. If she can mentally close the golf tournament in her head again and show a little bit more commitment to that process, then it could be a very, very good summer for her. Let's not forget the Olympics are right around the corner, too.
I think we saw a couple mental mistakes there from Lexi. Looked like the wrong club, maybe a mental mistake shared by she and her caddy. Also, a couple of chip shots where it looked like she just had no interest in getting the ball airborne. So nerves a big time. She came up short on that final putt to force a playoff on 18 as well when it was straight downhill. So there were plenty of nervous moments there. And for her, I hope that she can take some good from it, because getting her back in the winner's circle, especially in a major tournament, would be big for the American side of the game. As you mentioned, it's been 11 since the last time a woman won a major, and she was from the U.S. of A. Of course, there are 5 majors on the LPGA calendar, but still, it's been a couple of years. And like I said, it's such a deep game internationally. So I guess no surprise to see someone from across the pond take it home, take our national championship. But Yuka Saso, who is making a name for herself this year, right now, in her first real year on tour, spectacular, and what a powerful modern swing she has. There was much commentary on how similar it was to Rory McIlroy's. In fact, she used to watch YouTube videos on end of McIlroy's swing to try to get that motion down. I could think of very few players in the world that I would rather emulate than him, especially when it comes to hitting some tee balls about 300 yards down the middle of the fairway. All right, last thing. Well, 300-yard drives will be very much at a premium at Torrey Pines, Zach, in a couple of weeks, as once again we'll have the men's U.S. Open returning to that golf course, which also hosts, of course, the Farmers Insurance Open early on the golf calendar back in January. So it's a little bit of a different beast here, of course, in June. That rough's going to be grown up. It's going to be, I think, Zach, it's going to be one of those old-fashioned, brawny U.S. Open type tests. In fact, I was just watching part of the 2008 Open replay, of course, the one where Tiger beat Rocco in the playoff, and what the winning score for 72 holes was tied at 1 under. So I don't know if it's going to be quite that penal, quite that tough this time around, but I do know that Torrey Pines typically is one of the tougher golf courses on short hitters in the entire circuit. So even though you saw maybe some different types of players compete at the PGA Championship last year at Harding Park, that was also playing along. It was also kind of that soggy California marine layer type air going on as well, where the ball doesn't carry. And you saw a mid-level hitter, I guess you could say, not a really long hitter, but a decent hitter in Colin Morikawa take it home. I think it's going to be limited to the longer hitters in the field. So you look at your DeChambos, you look at I was going to say Dustin Johnson, but he hasn't been in good form. Brooks Koepka has, if he can stay healthy too. So I hate to just be so obvious here, but I think it's usual suspects just because of how much distance dictates success at Torrey. What's your feel about 10 days out? Actually, less than that, almost just purely a week out from the start of the U.S. Open.
I think it's Schauffele's time. I really, really do. I think
SoCal native too.
SoCal native, he played that course growing up, doesn't have as much experience from college, so he didn't have that familiarity, but he has a lot of familiarity. I mean, my pick going in would have been Jon Rahm, but as it is now, and of course he's won at Torrey Pines before as well, but as it sits, he's going to get a Wednesday practice round, maybe, and then he has to go out and play, and it's a different course. I mean, Tiger Woods had such a great track record at Torrey Pines, and then you saw just the Open just brings it out. I don't think it's going to be -1. I do think it's going to be maybe an 8 or a 9 under. I think there's going to be, I don't know if it's just the confidence in the technology. I don't know if maybe they saw what the PGA did with using the laser eye and using some of that. I think you're going to see a little bit of a higher score, but it's not going to be unreasonable. I think the USGA is really at a crossroads right now with how they're setting up the golf course. You don't want to you don't want to trip up the golf course too much. And of course there's not as much time because obviously the course was in use already for regular season play. So how much do you trick it up? How much rainfall has happened? When do you cut everything down, managing all of that? I mean, USGA has notoriously received some complaints for everything, for setup, for things along those lines, and it was a bugaboo. And I think you saw the adverse reaction. It was almost like the topic in baseball right now is the baseball juice. Well, let's not ask Pete Alonso that question. But regardless of all the circumstances regarding that, I mean, it's almost like a call response. The players complain, and then they want the players to be happy, so they make it easy, and then they go on, and the fans go, oh, this is the U.S. Open. We want to see them struggle. We want to see them suffer. And then it's such a seesaw. I think, I mean, I could see, I'm going to say, I know I said 8 or 9. I mean, I could see anywhere from 5 to 9 under. I mean, I could see, I'm gonna be a little bit more aggressive than the average bear on that. But I mean, personally, I would like to see Schauffele. I think he's got the right mindset. I think you're seeing a little bit more of his personality come out, and I think that's something that Phil Mickelson's really helped him out with playing these local games, is letting him enjoy himself and enjoy his golf more instead of the burden to nature that golf can become. And I think that change in his mindset is going to be that difference in helping him close out the golf tournament. And I don't think it was anything with his approach. I don't think it was anything that him or his father, Stefan, couldn't quite get together with the swing. I think it was just he had some really damn good golfers he came into competition with, and they just had something better than he did. And it just seemed like they were enjoying it, and it seemed like his mistakes were that he was consistently pressing because he was trying to make the right swing at the right time. And I think now that he can see the results, and now that he's having some fun, and he's got that fire in his belly to get that win again, and keep up with some of these guys that are starting to pass him in terms of name recognition and wins, I think this really sets up well for him. And he could turn that page. I mean, if Rahm gets proper practice, I could still see him compete just because of his length. If he does test negative, and of course he is underrated as a putter. He does. I think a lot of people knock his short game, but there's something about that Torrey Pines track that seems to bring out his attention on the greens, and it just seems to be a good match for him. I don't think you're going to see DeChambeau compete because he hasn't necessarily had the game. I mean, you compare it to Xander, yeah, he missed the PGA Championship Cup, but he's had 4 top 14s in his other 4 starts most recently to that, including most recently at T11 at Memorial. So, I mean, the game is absolutely there, and if he can just mentally compose himself for 4 rounds and just enjoy the walk, I think it's his. I really do.
Well, how could I forget about Phil? First of all, he hit it further than Brooks at Kiowa Island last month. Don't ignore the 50-year-old when it comes to distance off the tee. Of course, it almost feels like too good of a story, right, for Phil to go back-to-back in majors. But hey, it's a home game for him too. Not just Schauffele, but also Phil. Well, there's a lot of golfers from Southern California, but only a couple among the real stars of the game. Schauffele would be awesome as well. I'd love to see him get on the board. I'm not going to pick him necessarily. It's one of those where I have to see it to believe it. But, hey, at the same time, I did say earlier in this episode that I like the guys who are there a lot. And Schauffele has been there a lot late in majors. He was there at the Masters. Maybe took on a little too much on the 15th hole and the 17th hole. But he was also trying to rally from behind. So I don't know how much I'm going to deduct him for that. He has put himself in position. So he's got to be thinking, he looks at a guy like Morikawa who comes through in his first real run at a major and say, hey, why not me? Why not this time? He's plenty long as well. So he's got all the things going for him. And I'll have to take a look at those odds and see who might give you the best value. I haven't checked that out. Not that I'm a big gambler necessarily, but I am curious to see who might be sliding under the radar there. And yeah, it's a good point about Rahm because he won there. That was his first PGA Tour win, wasn't it, in San Diego? Yeah, a few years back. I think he won that in a playoff or a Monday finish, something like that. So he should, barring any kind of side effects or actual symptoms from his COVID infection, there's no reason that he can't go practice by himself here and get himself sharp or keep himself sharp. He was plenty sharp at Memorial for sure. Well, let us know what you think. We've gone on long enough about these 4 topics on the PGN Par 4. And we look forward to the U.S. Open. We'll talk to you after the U.S. Open as we'll take next week off and just enjoy the golf. For Zach Weiss, this has been Matt Gajtka saying good night, and we'll talk to you next time on the PGN Par 4 on Pittsburgh Sports Live.